What happens when two bass road warriors spend quality time talking music and life with one of their peers? Bassist, educator, author David C. Gross and bassist and head honcho of KnowYourBassPlayer.com, Tom Semioli, trade dates with the legends of rock, jazz, funk, blues, folk, country, and more. Notes from an Artist, revealing conversations with the legends who've created the soundtrack of our lives. What happens? You're about to find out. It's another episode of Notes from an Artist.
Hi, Tom Semioli, and I want to welcome you to the new and expanded Notes from an Artist. After 35 episodes of the Bass Guitar Channel radio show, it became apparent that we wanted to open up our farm to other instrumentalists, and what better way than to change our name and start right off with an incredible first, or you could call it the 36th show. Tonight, we have the extreme pleasure of welcoming to our show the great Richard Thompson. Richard started his career as a founding member of Fairport Convention, then formed an incredible band with his wife Linda, while also releasing solo records and doing session work for countless musicians. He recently released BEESWING, which is a memoir of his musical days starting in 1967, going through until 1975. This book ruminates over one of the most, if not the most creative periods in rock music. So let's begin our conversation with Richard Thompson. Oh, before we get started, I want to let you know that we have begun to archive our previous shows, and this is via our podcast, also titled Notes from an Artist. You can find it at notesfromanartist.buzzsprout.com. So, on with the show. Hi, Tom. Hi, Richard.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Richard Thompson.
Hi, how are you?
Hello, can you see me? You can see it. I'm good, thanks. Sorry, I was having some technical issues there. It just seems to be...
It's the 21st century, good. Richard. 21st century.
Oh, God. It can't be, really?
Yes. Anyway, good morning. You're in London today, yes? You're in London?
Yes, I'm in London, yes. And good, so good morning to you. Good afternoon to me.
Morning. Where in London?
London, Hampstead.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, northwest.
David is in a place called Connecticut.
I've heard of that.
Yes,
stories about that.
Close but far away. As a matter of fact, I wanted to tell you, back in 1969, I think it was, you guys were playing Alice Tully Hall, which was part of a Lincoln Center. And I grew up about 3 blocks from there. So I want to thank you very much for having your gig so conveniently located to my my apartment.
Well, anytime.
Yeah. And then, oddly enough, I think it was like the late 80s or early 90s, you played up in Nyack. You did a solo show at Ace Theater. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I was living about 4 miles from there at the time. So it's been wonderful. So if you come to Connecticut, I'm in Litchfield County.
Yeah, okay.
So
okay. Well, I'm following you as closely as I can.
Okay, anyway,
I'll get to your house eventually. I'll be doing a concert in your house.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Actually.
Right, you're in the exact same room there. Well, let's start. I have to full disclosure. I am actually part of the Richard Thompson legacy, as it is. In 1989, my band recorded what I feel is the definitive version of "She Twists the Knife Again," which we all remember from this record, right? Across a Crowded Room.
Yep. Sure.
And I think I got the mechanical from Harry Fox Agency, right? If I remember correctly. And judging by our album sales, I think, Richard, you probably got somewhere between $25 and $30 in royalty.
That's not bad. That beats Spotify any day of the week.
Yeah. Well, it did. The record company did put it on Spotify. So I would say in another 30 years, you'll probably get another $30 from that.
Give it 30 years, yeah, at least.
Anyway, and I see. Do you still have the sports jacket from the album shoot there?
No, whatever happened to that jacket? That was a good jacket. Damn.
You don't get to keep the albums. You don't get to keep the jackets from the album shoots, I guess.
Well, that was actually mine. Sometimes you do. So sometimes they'll let you keep the clothes. It depends. They've got stingier lately with that stuff. They used to do it all the time, but now you have to really negotiate, or they give you a deal. That's about as good as it gets, unless you're Lady Gaga or something. Which clearly I'm not.
And I'm sure the meat would obviously spoil by 2 or 3 weeks after she was wearing it. So
anyway, go ahead. Well, let's talk about the book first, of course. And then we'll talk about the bass players, because David and I are bass players. We make note of all the bass players on your records here. David, you got to hear this one.
I'd love to talk about the bass players on my records.
Oh, I have that one.
That's Jerry Sheff on there. We got to talk about that. And of course, you have both Danny Thompson and Jerry Sheff on this one, right? That's You, Me, Us, right? You have that.
Yeah.
Put it there, pal. That's going to be another remake. I'm going to do that. But, when we read this fascinating book, which I read on the Kindle, it seems that Fairport Convention, your career coincided with really a transformation in pop culture when rock and roll became rock, and it wasn't just an art form for teenagers. It became an art unto itself, in a sense.
I think that's true, yeah. Well, rock and roll was seen as something fairly expendable, something that wouldn't last very long. It will burn out pretty quick. As kids, grew up and got sensible and got decent haircuts and went into real jobs like accountancy and banking. Thank God that didn't happen. At some point, rock and roll became more intelligent. And I think probably the watershed was something like Birds doing Mr. Tambourine Man or something. Right. It was intelligent lyrics coming into popular music, and I think then you could call it rock. Right. But then it became this other thing. Because that was kind of a mixed blessing, but because rock also was this sort of umbrella term for a lot of pretentious music, a lot of, glam rock and progressive stuff that was a little self-indulgent, and a lot of metal that was very self-parodying. That was all called rock. I don't know if I sit comfortably in the world of rock. I think I'm kind of a folk rocker, really. Quite like, if people accuse me of rock, I say I'm folk. And that makes sense?
It does. Yeah. But again, it was a fertile time when the boundaries were really being erased. Your contemporaries, Frank Zappa, Jimi Hendrix, Soft Machine. It seems like the record industry was still the wild, wild west in that sense.
Well, it was. It's nice when it is that way. It's nice when, there's lots of different genres going on. It's nice when record labels are confused and don't know who to sign. These are the good moments in popular music when creativity flows and the business is lagging behind. And the bad times are where people have got the audience figured out and they figured out exactly the tempo, the song should be at, the kind of the structure. I mean, a bit like kind of modern Nashville, I suppose, really, where it's so formulaic. There are good times, and I think the mid '60s in the UK was one of those times when it was just very creative, and the business was scrambling to catch up with that.
In your book, you talk about how, and I don't think I've ever heard anyone mention Hap Sash and the Colored Coat in print ever.
Why would they?
Exactly. Well, I actually had the record.
Grief.
Yeah, well, it was the cover. See, that was the other thing. There was some great, weren't they originally an art group before they tried to be musicians? Isn't that how that?
Yes, they were. And they were an art group. They did other people's album covers. They did clothes. So I would expect them to have a good album cover. I wouldn't expect the music to be anything special, but I would expect them to be visually very engaged.
Yes. And what I found interesting is, in the book, you talk about Floyd, Soft Machine, Fairport, all doing the same gigs. There was such a wonderful moment where there were no compartmentalized, this is rock, this is blues, this is this is that. And I think it created a very interesting scene, as you said before.
Yeah. I don't know if all that came from Bill Graham. Maybe it did, but perhaps that filtered across the Atlantic. Bill Graham would do these bills that would always be very eclectic. He'd have a jazz band, and he'd have a blues guy solo or something, and then he'd have Jefferson Airplane or the Dead.
Right.
He'd really mix up the genres and the bills, and maybe that spirit came across, to the UK in '66, '67. It's possible.
Well, I think one of the strangest bills I saw it was if opening for Rod Stewart and Faces, who were opening for Black Sabbath on their very first. I don't think you could get much wilder. That's
a strange one. The Phil Maurice, I saw Albert King open for Chuck Berry, open for The Who. Right. And that was pretty strange. There's a kind of logic to that, but it was almost like it should have been reversed or something. It was just a strange, strange billing. But so that was that. We had that spirit in the UK, and it was wonderful because audiences were open-minded or just drugged. You could be on a bill with almost anybody. There were large bills in those days. There were clubs that would have 5, 10 bands on a night. There were universities that will book 10, 20 bands a night. So there's lots of work as well. That was the other thing that was a great help to Fairport was the minute that we became a professional band, there was tons of work. We could play 7 nights a week if we wanted to. It was that good. So that was a great launching pad for us.
That was Fairport Convention doing It's All Right, Ma, It's Only Witchcraft, a song written by Ashley Hutchins and our guest tonight, Richard Thompson. This is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
Now, just to fast forward 50 years, there's really no record industry as you knew it, as we knew it anymore. With streaming, an artist can go directly to an audience. You don't have to go through the machinations of advertising in a record company. In essence, the artist has all the power in his or her hands. Could we perhaps see in the digital era a renaissance like you experienced with Fairport in the 60s? Is that a possibility, do you think?
Ooh. It's a possibility. I'd love to think that there could be more live music. I would think that would be the basis of a revival like that. Not just like a YouTube revival, but but an actual lots more people playing. Even if it's just more open mics and cafe, acoustic gigs. It'd be wonderful to see more live music as we had it in the 60s. I think Spotify is actually the ideal model in many ways for audiences to artists and vice versa. The only problem is it just pays shit. If artists got properly recompensed for the streams. Then that would be wonderful. That would be just great. If I just could make a living from their intellectual property, wouldn't that be great?
Well, I think we could almost say as a benefit from the pandemic, in essence, Sweetwater just sold about $1 billion worth of musical instruments during the last 14, 15 months.
Wow.
Yeah, but that could be it could be a good thing that people are actually buying real instruments. And perhaps that's a precursor to something like, maybe 5 years from now, 6 years, however many years, where things get back to, I guess we call it a new normal. What is it? We interviewed Ron Carter on Monday. He calls it the COVID intermission, and perhaps something. Optimistically, yes, I agree. I think that the fact that many people are consuming instruments in that way is wonderful. I hope that they'll be consuming, trombones and pedal steel guitars and classical harps and all kinds of other things as well. I hope it's not just guitars and keyboards. I hope other things get noticed as well. And basses, of course. We must have basses.
Of course.
Where would the world be without basses?
Well, actually, you could even say that is starting to happen. You see the popularity of Mumford & Sons, which definitely come from a folk tradition, and the Luminaires, Jason Isbell. I would think that young people would maybe go back and look at Fairport, Matty Pryor, Nick Drake, Steel Eye Span. Nick Drake had a tremendous resurgence here thanks to an automobile commercial. And then, of course, Fairport is almost now like a Philharmonic, because Fairport still plays. They're, dare I say, an institution.
They are an institution. It's true. Not something we ever wanted to contemplate, but I think the reality is that it's it's a multi-generational band now, and I can envisage no original members. I can envisage all the original members being dead, and their kids or other people carrying on the tradition. I think that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I see it that way myself. But so many wonderful stories in the book. One of my favorites is your Paul McCartney story, where you didn't go to his birthday party.
Yeah.
That one?
Yeah. I was just a snob, really. I thought the Beatles were sort of a pop band, and I was more interested in other things. So, for me, it wasn't cool to go to Paul McCartney's party. Just, inverted snobism. If you ask me again, I'll go. If you ask me to his 80th.
Okay.
I'll turn up. He didn't take it too personally.
And then, of course, I love the anecdote of you peeking in Joni Mitchell's notebook.
That was sort of artistic research, let's say. I'm always interested in method, in creative people's method. Not that you can really find out about their creativity from it, but you can find out everything around that creativity. I love to know how people write, how people work, what hours people work. All that kind of stuff fascinates me. So I probably stepped too far in taking a peek at Joni's notebook. But it was interesting. And I think in the book, book, I compare it to Sandy's notebook.
Right.
It's been, very, very similar, very, very sort of visually creative as well as musically creative and lyrically creative. Just creative people are interesting to me.
I had a quick question regarding, it seems that so many musicians were going to art school back then. And was that basically because, you had to go to some sort of a school, but you didn't want to really take any quote unquote courses, if you know what I mean?
Yes, I think that's true. For those of a non-scholarly bent, art school was a kind of an opt-out, I suppose. And there were a lot of them. I don't know why, but post World War II, that there were lots of art schools in the UK, and Thatcher closed down most of them. Thank you, Mrs. T, for doing that. But at the time, I mean, you had Raitt Davis, who was a couple of years ahead of my sister at Hornsey Art College.
Right.
Eric Clapton, some of the other Yardbirds as well. I think a lot of people from the folk scene were at art school. Yeah, it was like a stepping stone, or a way of avoiding having to make decisions at 18 years old. You could postpone it another 3 years before you had to confront the world. And obviously, it was a great breeding ground for lots of bands.
And to sort of add to that, it seems to me that pre-Kindle world, so many more folks were reading books. You seem to have a wide berth of novels and such. So I think the level of lyric writing was far superior as well.
I suppose so. People certainly read more, and that's surely a good thing. There were less distractions, of course, to reading. Reading was something that you did all the time when you had some free time. I didn't have a TV for years, so I'd just read. You didn't have computer distractions, Facebook distractions. You went on your phone every 5 minutes. I think people did a lot more reading and a lot more dreaming, really. I noticed people on journeys, people on a train or something, everyone's on their phone and no one's looking out the window. I just look out the window because I just love to see the world go by and look at the trees and the fields and the buildings and all that sort of stuff, Or, I'll read a book, one or the other. But the last thing I want to do is be on my phone.
That was Fairport Convention with the beautiful voice and songwriting ability of Sandy Denny. Richard Thompson, our guest on guitar. This is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com. I have a 16-year-old, and it's an interesting concept, reading anything that has nothing to do with school, if you know what I mean. I remember back then I would read all the time, even with TV. It was something you did. Well, with most of the music of today, which,
There you go, David.
It's one of those things. It's to have insight into other human beings. Like a novel is a good way of obtaining that insight. The cinema is another one, but they're different forms, and you get different kinds of access from those. But I mean, certainly, I think you need books to understand people, really, and to understand history and to understand different human situations. Not everything is covered by cinema. Not everything can be described. The inner workings of people can't always be described cinematically. You can kind of watch people's faces, and you can watch an actor kind of expressing subtle things. A novel will actually describe someone's thought process and someone's emotional state. I think it's important to have that, really, to understand the human condition and to find out about life.
Good point. You mentioned cinema. You were a fan of the French New Wave. As a matter of fact, Belmondo seems to have entered the book as well.
Well, he did. Well, when I was a teenager, I mean, pretty from about the age of 14, we just go every single week where we go to the cinema in London that showed the Continental films. So all these great films from the 60s and even the 50s. So we're watching Italian, French, Scandinavian, German cinema. A lot of it experimental, a lot of it just cutting edge stuff and wonderful stuff. And a lot of that has really stayed with me through the years. I mean, I still rewatch some of those films and I'm just gobsmacked at how good they are. Technically they've probably been surpassed many, many times, but in terms of what they're saying and the emotion in those films, I mean, it's just staggeringly good stuff.
You mentioned the British films. I'll tell you a funny story. Being an American kid growing up, the first time I saw 39 Steps, it dawned on me that there was a Foley artist. Oh, you could actually hear the footsteps. Where if you look at 50s and early 60s American film, it was completely quiet.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, that's a good film.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great film. Love it.
Now, in the process of writing this book, Richard, I mean, you don't keep diaries, you don't keep journals. How was it for you? Did you go online to research yourself to fill in some of the blanks, perhaps?
I had to, yeah. You know, it was a joy and fairly easy to write the anecdotal stuff, you know, to write the stories. Stringing them together was very problematic because I had no timescale. I had no chronological reference of when a lot of stuff happened. So I had to go to websites where, you know, they claim to have every Fairport gig, you know, ever, which they don't, but they claim they do. So there's still holes.
Sure.
And then I just had to rely on other people's books, other websites to try to put it all together. And I had amazing editors too, that would do a lot more research than I did and would actually nail stuff down incredibly well. I was quite amazed at how accurately they could put a time frame on things. So that was very useful.
Yeah. What role did Scott play? I know Scott's passed on, but you started this project with him, didn't you?
Yeah, well, it was Scott's idea to do a memoir about that time period, you know, and he bugged me, and I said, oh, well, okay, let's let's try an interview process and see how that works. So he'd interview me, and then he'd write it up, and I kind of not recognized myself in what he sent back. So I said, look, this really isn't working. Let me write it, and then you come in at the end, and you can help me to shape it, edit it, etc. But sadly, Scott passed away before that could happen.
You stop in 1975. Is there any particular reason? Does life get boring after 1975 that you didn't want to document it?
Yeah, it gets very boring. Well, in 1976, I think, as I mentioned, the kind of afterword to the book, I was really pretty much not playing music for a year.
Right.
I did other things. And when I came back to it, I didn't think we made very good records. And I didn't want to write sort of negatively about the next 3-4 years. And things don't really pick up again until 81, when we did what was described as the tour from hell. And then do I really want to write about that? I don't know. Maybe someone else will write that book. So that's the reason I stopped. You know, after that time period, you know, when you're young, things are happening to you for the first time. You know, we're releasing 3 albums in 1969. I mean, it's a very intense
That's
time.
amazing.
Yeah, you know, it really is intense. And after that, things spread out more. So if I was going to take anecdotes from the next 20, 30 years, it would only be 250 pages. It's just not as intense. And perhaps if it was that intense, I'd be dead by now. I mean, it was you can do it when you're young.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Wow. One of the things that really brought me back, in a nutshell, my sister was good friends with Tony Hicks of the Hollies, Eddie Hardin, and Jim McCarty. So when she would travel to England, she'd bring back all these melody makers and new music expresses. And I would, as a kid, cut stuff out. I have a scrapbook full of all of that. Wow. So when you mention people like the Albion Country Band, I had those records. I had Martin Carthy and Soft Machine, Kevin Ayers. It was interesting. We did an interview with Rick Wills, and he would talk a little bit about Kevin Ayers. You really captured that period in time so well, or at least as well as an American kid reading New Music Express and Melody Maker would think. And of course, I was so much of an Anglophile. I bought Hapsash, so obviously I would have bought. But actually, I thought it was hashish, but that was another thing entirely. So whatever. But and of course, there was a moment in time when she brought back a red Noel Redding jacket, which may have been purchased at your sister's store. I'll never know. My sister has passed on. But there was so much synchronicity to reading that book, to how I envisioned all of it. For me, it was fabulous. And another quick story, in about, I guess it was 71, Sandy came to America to do a solo tour. And she played The Bitter End. However, it was the coldest night of the year. And only myself and a couple of friends went to the show. She did the whole show. It was beautiful. Then came out front and started chatting to us. The best quote of the night was, she said, "Hey, have you guys heard of Monty Python?" I said, "No, what kind of music is it?"
Yeah. Well, there you go. I'll have to ask my sister about Noel's jacket. She did outfit Noel Redding. So it was red.
It was red. It was the cover of the American edition of Are You Experienced had that particular jacket on it.
Okay. There's a fair chance that was my sister's work.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. Wow.
Wasn't Granny Takes a Trip? That was the go-to rock and roll shop, wasn't that it?
It was the go-to, hippie shop.
Oh, okay.
To get your flared trousers and your military cast-offs. I mean, there was no one called I was Lord Kitchener's valet, where they'd have old military jackets. Some of them extraordinarily beautiful. Hendrix used to wear this old, 19th century military thing. There were a lot of shops on the King's Road in those days.
Right.
Yeah, Granny Takes a Trip. Yeah, it was interesting clothing scene. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think it's been as good since then. I think that was a very creative time for was a creative time for virtually everything.
Mm-hmm.
For God's sakes. As you say, Mary Quant was really big and such. So, yeah. That was Meet on the Ledge by Fairport Convention with our guest, Richard Thompson. This is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
What has been the feedback from fans and your peers on the book?
Generally, surprisingly positive. I'm not being sued by anybody. This is good news. Forbes' widow was actually complimentary. I thought if anyone was going to give me a hard time about the way I described it, Dave Swarbrick in the book, as being like someone I loved, but we had a kind of an antagonistic relationship. I thought, well, I wonder how that's going to go down with his widow. But she thought it was an accurate picture of Swarb, and she was glad that it was warts and all. So that's pretty good. Yeah, generally, the reaction has been very good from friends. There's a couple of old bandmates I'm still waiting to hear from to see if there's any serious divergence of memory over a few incidents. There may be. But, reviews have been great. Feedback from the public has been very good too.
Yeah, sure.
There's always a few people who whine and say, you aren't describing enough. Enough minor chords, there isn't enough insight into your playing technique. And I think, well, God, that's a book that sells about 6 copies, it has to be a bit broader than that. And other people are saying, well, surely, you kind of glossed over the breakup of your marriage with Linda. And actually, that's outside the scope of the book. The book finished 75. But, there's always some people who complain about everything. But generally, it's been very well received. And, people whose insight I appreciate a lot have been complimentary, so it's good.
David, you were particularly enamored with the audio version, yes?
Oh yeah, I read the book. I confess, I read it on Kindle, but then the weather's been so nice. I've been dry. I live really in the hills, so I agree with you. I really like, and right now the greenery is just so vibrant. Mm-hmm. So I bought the audiobook. And so I was listening to it as I was traveling. I really enjoyed that.
I'm so glad to hear it. Yeah, it's a strange thing to doing an audiobook. There's all kinds of things you have to think of. You have to keep your voice at the same pitch for 10 days. And some poor engineer has to cut out all the plosives. And
well, after today, that's me. I do that all
okay. Every time you open your mouth, you make a little noise. You make all that. There's kind of lip noises, and you have to be very careful about that sort of stuff, as well. So to keep lubricated. But in breath, all that sort of stuff, that you wouldn't think of is problematic. But I was able to record it at home, which was great in my home studio. So I didn't have to go anywhere. I could take my time, and that was all wonderful. And I have a wonderful sound engineer, travels on the road with me. So he did all the dirty work.
I know that
must have been nice to hear yourself back telling your own story. That must be an interesting experience.
No, it's horrible. Hearing yourself back. Yeah. I think I did an okay job, but I wouldn't want to sit and listen to myself reading particularly.
See, David and I love listening to ourselves on the radio, don't we, Dave?
Well, to tell you the truth, for the hour that we spend or the hour and a half that we spend, it takes me about 5 or 6 hours to edit it down. By that time, when we broadcasted, I press play, turn it on mute, and I have an alarm so that I know when to turn it off. I don't want to hear it at all.
Oh, absolutely. I don't blame you. Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah.
But I tell you, it's great because another benefit of the pandemic is that we're able to talk to people that, on a normal day would probably be a little too busy to do it. So it's been a great benefit, and it's a wonderful thing, to really explore all of that. And we will not talk about your minor chords. We will not even talk about ninth chords. So
we have to talk about ninth chord, half diminished chords, David.
Oh, this is your life, Richard Thompson. That's what this is going to be.
Well, if my life can be boiled down to a minor ninth, then I should be very happy. and it probably can.
That was Fairport Convention doing Walk a While with our very special guest, Richard Thompson. This is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
Richard, hopefully we're emerging out of COVID. Is it still a strict lockdown in London or no?
No, it's actually very optimistic right now. That there's like 0 deaths in the UK.
Right. Okay.
Hardly any cases whatsoever. So that they're slowly unlocking things. Next week, I think we get back to everything opening up: restaurants, museums. All that kind of stuff. And the target is June. They're supposed to basically open up everything. And it's like life is normal. It depends on keeping the India variant at bay. Right. But things are looking very good right now.
Now, when you do return to the stage, given that you've just put out the book, are you going to re-explore some of your earlier material or represent that, include that in your set list?
Well, I think so. One of the things I'm going to do, certainly in the UK, the next thing I do in the UK is going to be a kind of part playing, part reading tour. Like in theaters, but I'll read a few extracts.
Okay.
And then play music that's relevant to the period. And I mean, I play the old songs from time to time anyway.
Right, you do, yeah.
In my shows, so it won't be a total surprise to me or the audience. But yeah, I will be trying to theme things a little bit towards the 60s/70s.
And I've seen several of the shows you did with Bonnie Raitt.
Oh, really? Yeah, great.
Yeah, we're quite extraordinary on the west side there. Again, I guess, interesting to revisit songs that you wrote 50 years ago. I know Bob Dylan, of course, Paul Simon put sort of a different twist on it. How does it feel singing something that you wrote when you were 19, 20?
It's a complicated feeling. Complicated.
Yeah.
On the one hand, I think, you're proud of certain songs that you wrote a long time ago, and you thought, well, I did pretty well there. If you're going to sing it, then sometimes you have to forgive your own naivety, and you think, well, I don't have that worldview anymore. I just think differently from whoever that person was. So you have to find different kinds of emotion in the song if you're going to perform it. So I have to really look at that. Some songs I won't perform because I can't find the connection to them anymore. I'm reasonably proud of a lot of the Fairport stuff. I think some of that's really good. Yeah. Some of the Fairport albums, some of the albums I did with Linda, stuff from that era. I think a lot of that holds up actually very well, and I'm not ashamed. There are things I'm ashamed of, but I'm not ashamed of those.
That was Richard and Linda Thompson doing Shoot Out the Lights. This is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
And of course, David, we need to talk about Richard's bass players. And you have had some remarkable players: Pat Donaldson, David Pegg, of course, who you've done many records with. Bruce Lynch, who did the original bass part on She Twists the Knife Again. Don't forget that. And Jerry, how about working? Tell me about working with Elvis's bass player. I mean, You, Me, Us, Mirror Blue, Rumor and Sigh, Amnesia, Daring Adventures. He did quite a few records with you.
Yeah, he was. He's a wonderful player. He was Mitchell Froome's go-to bass player, and for good reason. People don't know Jerry. He was a very accomplished session player.
Absolutely.
From the LA session scene, in the '60s, played on things like Along Comes Mary,
by the
Association.
Yeah.
Yeah, played on the Holy Mackerel album, which is a wonderful album, a bit obscure, and was in Elvis Presley's band. He kind of swapped out with
Norbert Putnam, was it?
Norbert Putnam.
No, it was the other one. Emery Gordy swapped out with Emery
Gordy, of course, another guy.
So he'd be in for a few years, and then Emery would do it for a few years, and they go backwards and forwards. But Jerry's just great. I mean, a really interesting, very creative player. He's one of those bass players that when the track's finished, you're humming the bass line. Forget the melody. The thing that catches your ear is the bass line. He was that good and that interesting. We'd use different basses for different effects. You play down electro sometimes, play the Fender sometimes. Okay. And just a great guy, and a few good Elvis stories. Here and there.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And he lives in Scotland now. I haven't seen him for a few years. I think he married some Scottish heiress, as one does.
As one does. Good work if you can get it, yeah.
That was Richard Thompson doing I Can't Wake Up to Save My Life with Jerry Sheff on bass. This is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
And then, of course, your long relationship with Danny Thompson.
Yeah, Danny's just a kind of unique acoustic bass player.
Sure.
Extraordinary player. I mean, he's played with so many different people, so many different records, in so many different styles. He started out as a kind of bebop player, playing with probably the UK's top bebop musician at that time, Tubby Hayes, in the Tubby Hayes Quartet. But he also played with people like Josh White, the old blues guys. Played with people like David Sylvian, Kate Bush on Kate Bush records.
Thousands of record credits. He's almost like Ron Carter is here. We spoke to Ron the other day, and Danny's resume is incredible. Yeah,
it's incredible. And of course, he was in Pentangle, which were a very sort of groundbreaking kind of folk / jazz band, I suppose you'd say, with Burt Jansch, John Ramborn, etc. And probably, missed his career as a stand-up comedian. I mean, Danny's one of the funniest people on the planet, absolutely hilarious, and kind of an outrageous personality. Larger than life. Heart the size of a planet, and just incredible stories. His life has just been fascinating.
You have to get a hold of him, David.
Yeah, we will have to try. And
you should. Yeah, he'd be great to interview, and I'll ask him about throwing Roy Harper off the ferry.
Oh,
see if he remembers that one. Yeah.
Does Roy Harper know how to swim? Well, he must.
No, he didn't.
Go.
It happened. It was an incident that happened.
Were you there? Did you witness it?
No, I wasn't there. It was Pentangle, were on their way to a festival, I think in Scandinavia somewhere, where you often have to take a lot of ferries, and Roy Harper was kind of doing the same trip, and I think Roy must have been pontificating a bit about his own genius, and Danny said, well, if you don't shut up, you're going over the side. And Roy must have continued it because Danny said, all right, that's it. And he chucked him off the ferry. I think as Roy is hitting the water, he said, I can't swim. And I believe Danny said, well, you should have thought of that first, shouldn't you?
That was Sweetheart on the Barricade by Richard Thompson and Danny Thompson on their recording, Industry. This is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
Why would you talk bass with Danny Thompson? Just talk about. Interestingly, he used Willie Weeks on First Light with Andy Newmark and Neil Larson. What prompted you to get Willie and those guys on the record?
Well, it kind of came as a package. I was doing a record. I was playing in the rhythm section behind a British singer called Julie Covington, who was kind of singer-actress, who had a big hit with Don't Cry for Me Argentina, had a big hit in the UK with that tune from Evita. And she's also, on primetime TV in this kind of, sitcom called Rock Follies. So I was drafted into the rhythm section. So it's me and Willie Weeks and Neil Larson on keyboards and Andrew Newmark on drums. It seems to be going well, and we seem to hang together quite well as a rhythm section. So Joe Boyd said, "Can you guys stay another week and we'll do Rich's record?" So that's really how it happened. It wasn't like I said, I have to have Willie Weeks. It was like the package. But he's a fantastic player. I mean, probably a bit too funky, really, for my music. But and it was sort of a bit disco in those days. So the record sounds a little bit disco. But it was fun to work with those guys. It was great.
That was Richard and Linda Thompson doing Don't Let a Thief Steal Into Your Heart. This is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
Andrew Newmark said, when I spoke to him on the phone, he said, you know the number you just dialed? I said, yeah. He said, that's the fee.
Well, those guys were the top
they were,
LA guys.
Yeah, they were great players.
Hopefully the first number wasn't a 9.
Yeah, I don't think it was, but no, good point.
And then, of course, Taras has played on many of your records as well. I think he was on, he's on Dreamatic. He's on lots of your records.
Yeah, Taras, a wonderful player. Taras is all about feel.
Okay.
You know, and with Michael Jerome as the drummer, I just love the feel of those two guys together. It's just fantastic. Obviously, I'm very happy because they've been in my band now for 15 years plus, and I've used them on every record I can. So Taras used to play with Lucinda Williams, and
right, yeah.
I used to play with Dwight Yoakam. So he came more from a kind of country end of things, but play anything. It's just a great player.
That was Richard Thompson doing Beatnik Walking.
I know you read the Burt Wheaton book, right? That was your back in the day, right? What was it? Play guitar in a day?
Play in a day. Everybody read that book.
Okay.
But if you asked, Jimmy Page or something, Eric Clapton, all these people, how did you get started? They'd say, play in a day. And you could play in a day. This is a very clever little book that really kind of encouraged you in small steps and gave you confidence. And you could actually achieve, like in a day, you could achieve in a week, like you're halfway through the thing. Probably in a month you finish that and you've moved on to something else. You're already in the charts by the time you finish the book. It's and it was written by this really kind of square, hokey guy, Burt Wheaton, who was just is on variety shows, but playing the guitar, the squarest guy you can imagine.
Well, he's so square, he's cool because I see he's parodied on a lot of British television.
Oh, is he? Well, he deserves it. Yeah.
Another topic David and I get into is music education. David studied at Berkeley. I went to University of Miami. Are you the type of band leader that kind of gives his rhythm section specific directions, or do you just hire guys because, like you said, their feel and what they bring to the table?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. I think I tend to send demos out to the band.
Okay.
And then they come back sometimes with other ideas, and I don't impose myself too much on them. So sometimes I'll say, well, this is getting away from what I thought it should be, but other times I'm usually happy for their contribution. There was a classic case, I think 2 albums ago, or was it the last album, where I sent a demo that I thought was in 3/4, and they came back playing it starting on beat 2 in 6/8. And having learnt it that way, that they were unable to hear it any other way. So I said, okay, you keep doing what you're doing. I'll do what I'm doing. I think it will mesh together. So it's got this weird rhythm. There's like two rhythms. And if you kind of turn the stereo all the way to the left, you hear it in 6/8. If you turn the stereo all the way to the right, it's in 3/4. It's just bizarre, but it sort of works. It's real kind of
what
bizarre.
Track is that? What track is that?
God, I'm trying to think of the name. What's it called? It's called I should know the names of my own songs, but I really do. It's called She Was Meant for Me.
That was our guest, Richard Thompson, doing She Was Meant for Me. This is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
It almost sounds like one of those really complex African things, where you're never quite sure where the one is,
One of the things about British music that's always intrigued me, and I think really in some respects the Beatles brought it, was the music hall quality. Ray Davies is a big proponent of that as well. And you have such a connection to earlier musics where over here it seems a lot more, all right, that's over and done, we go on to the next thing. Oh, that's over and done, we go on to the next thing. The reason I bring this up is you released a record of really old music. It was a compendium of, oh, hold on one second, Godfrey, our dog, needs to go out. Just one moment.
I see who really runs things around there.
Yes. The dog's running. I think the dog should do the interviews personally, but David insists on us doing them.
Limited vocabulary.
It's the wife that always wanted to do a show of bass player wives talking about their husbands.
I've always found that in bands, it's often the bass player who's the raver, who's the one, the wild guy.
Oh, really?
The one who's always up partying. The one often gets the girls as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could mention Danny Thompson as being one of those examples. Pat Donaldson as well. I mean, another wonderful bass player. Who you mentioned in passing, was absolutely one of the loudest people I've ever really worked with. Boisterous personality, but lots of fun and a great player.
And then Ashley, of course, was a fabulous player.
Ashley was a great player. Yeah, he didn't quite fit the bill. Okay, forget that analogy. Yeah, Ashley was a bit more intellectual and quiet, but Ashley was a band leader. I mean, that was kind of his role. His father was a band leader. So his father had a kind of jazz band. So Ashley was more the planner, the thinker.
So, no, just to get back, tell me about that recording, why you felt the need to release something that really was so much more of a compendium of materials from the past.
Well, it was a show that we did. You're talking about the 1,000 Years of Popular Music?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That was a show that we did. I did it originally at the Getty Museum, and it seemed to go down well. So we did it as a tour. We did about 3 or 4 tours of it. I just thought it was an interesting idea to go back and look at earlier music forms, going back to literally 1000 AD, and see what we could find back there, and then work our way through the centuries. We discovered lots of things. We discovered lots of really great music that had been fairly neglected. Things became more familiar as we got into the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s maybe. But even then, we were finding more obscure songs like we do "See My Friends" by the Kinks rather than one of their hits. We were doing things where we felt we could do a good interpretation of them, and we were really trying to uncover and polish some jewels from the past. I think we partly succeeded in doing that. So much music gets left behind on the trash heap of history, and going back and looking at stuff, you think, well, that's a great idea. It's a shame that idea died away. Perhaps we could revive that. And you look at a song, perhaps a song by the Troubadours from the 12th century, and you think that's a really interesting verse structure. What a shame that people don't do that anymore. People don't think in those terms anymore. So there was all kinds of things to discover. Pretty interesting stuff that we kind of unveiled. And it was just a lot of fun to play it as well. Great fun to play it.
One of the feelings I get from reading the book is that you were all a bunch of ethnomusicologists just trying to discover new things, or old things for that matter.
Yeah, I think we were. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a professional ethnomusicologist, but as amateurs, I think we absolutely were. And Fairport always had this sort of idealistic bent where we didn't want to sound like other people. We wanted to be, different from other bands. So even when we were playing American music styles, we'd find old jug band songs, or we'd find stuff from the 20s, or we'd find obscure Dylan songs instead of popular Dylan songs.
Right.
We were always really scraping around and looking for obscurities. We thought that made us very cool. To some extent, perhaps it did.
It worked. One of Tom's friends, Sal Maida, who was a bass player in Roxy Music, is releasing, or did it just come out?
He's putting out a book about 100 albums that bombed that you have to know. So we'll have to get that to you.
The title.
Exactly.
And lastly, Richard, your thoughts on when you hear other artists interpret your work, Johnny Cash, the Neville Brothers, REM. Any particular rendition? I know you'll love my version of She Twists the Knife, but...
I shall.
Any Richard Thompson covers that you really treasure, that you think, they really nailed it?
Yeah, Bonnie Raitt did a great cover of Dimming the Day. Emmylou did a great cover. I can talk about more obscure people.
That was Curtis Stigers doing Waltzing for Dreamers, a great tune by the great Richard Thompson. This is Notes from an Artist at CygnusRadio.com.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I'm really thrilled when people cover my songs, and generally happy. If people do a literal copy, sometimes I think, well, they haven't really added anything.
Right.
Sometimes you hear a version of a song and you think, well, I think they missed the point of the song. It's a nice, pleasant sounding. They missed the real grit of it. The inner core of it. But generally, I mean, it's a delight to hear people throwing your song back at you in that sense, and it's a good feeling, like when your peers, your musical peers, like what you do. That's a great feeling.
Your neighbor Cindy Staghoff sends her regards to you. And,
okay, yeah, get that.
We're looking forward to seeing you back on the bandstand in the US of A.
Well, stuff's coming back. I mean, it is it is happening slowly, which is great.
Yeah, New York is starting to open up a little bit. So I think by July, David, we're fully open, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Thank God.
Yeah.
That would be great. Yeah, I've got some outdoor stuff on the East Coast in June.
About 4 miles from my house?
Yeah.
Hopefully even closer than that.
That'd be wonderful.
We're trying. You have to speak to my agent and see what he can.
I will. I'll give him
for you.
You seem to have room on the couch in the back there, David. So, I mean,
that's true.
Plenty of play there, Richard. There you can. You're welcome.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
You know the number you just dialed. well, thank you guys. Thank you so much. That was really fun. Real pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
All right. Be well. See you soon.
All right. Same to you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, David. Bye-bye now.
Well, folks, that's it for tonight. I want to thank my co-hosts Tom Semioli and Richard Thompson for a wonderful 2 hours. Thanks again, guys. And want to let you know that starting today, we will be archiving all of our shows on our Notes from an Artist podcast site, which is notesfromanartist.buzzsprout.com. So check out all our previous shows, and we look forward to seeing you next week, and have a great week. All the best. This is David Gross for Notes from an Artist on cygnusradio.com.